What is the 2022 CHIPS and Science Act? Why are we spending $52 billion of our American tax dollars to supplement the already highly profitable semiconductor industry? And what new chip plants are going to be built as a result of this investment? In this video, I'm going to answer these and more questions. But first, let's dig into some background on the semiconductor industry. Chips are critically important to the U.S. for a lot of different reasons. They're an essential building block of almost every product we build nowadays. From cars to weapons to toys, phones, computers, appliances, even your washer and dryer, your microwave oven, these products cannot be built without semiconductors. So as we've seen over the past 2 years, a shortage of semiconductors can stop manufacturing across a lot of different industries, and it can be very devastating to our economy. Not only that, semiconductors are very complex, expensive, and hard to design and build. So it's not something that we could ramp up overnight. It takes years of investment and time to build up a semiconductor industry. Chips are one of the United States' biggest exports. They're our fourth biggest export, after petroleum, airplanes and airplane parts, and cars. So it's hard, if not impossible, to overstate how important semiconductors are to our economy and to our national security. And it would be dangerous for the U.S. to allow foreign countries to control the supply of semiconductors. 30 years ago, the U.S. led the world in chip manufacturing. However, over the past 2 decades, South Korea, Taiwan, and China have passed us up in manufacturing, partly because of their governments helping to subsidize that industry as a strategic industry. So the U.S. still leads in design of chips, but in manufacturing we've fallen behind. Only 1 in 8 chips in the world are manufactured in the United States. Most of the American chip manufacturers are actually just chip designers, and they outsource the manufacturing to countries in Taiwan or South Korea, especially TSMC and Samsung. Even the largest chip makers in the US, such as NVIDIA, AMD, and Apple, don't actually build their own chips. They outsource the manufacturing to TSMC. Chip fabrication plants are insanely expensive to build and extremely complex. It takes 3 to 4 years to build a new chip fab, and it costs $10 to $20 billion to build. So it's a massive investment. The fabs are the size of 10 to 20 football fields, and they're filled with hundreds of very complex and expensive tools that are used to build the semiconductors. The air and water have to be so pure that even a single speck of dust can ruin a semiconductor, because the traces in a chip are 1,000th the thickness of a human hair. They're microscopic. So single specks of dust can ruin the yield of a semiconductor output. For this reason, semiconductors are built in an enclosed clean room with purified air and water. The 2022 CHIPS and Science Act has the goal of restoring the U.S. as the world leader in both the design and manufacturing of semiconductors. It will achieve this. Congress has allocated $52 billion to build new chip fabs in the United States. Without this stimulus, it is cheaper to build and operate fabs in Asia, specifically in Taiwan, China, or South Korea, than it is to build them in the U.S. As we've seen over the past 20 years, the U.S. has consistently lost out on those fab manufacturing sites. With the CHIPS and Science Act, we'll rebuild our high-tech manufacturing in the United States. In addition to the CHIPS and Science Act, state and local governments are also competing to win these fab manufacturing sites. So they're adding tax incentives to attract top-tier fab construction projects to their states and their localities. So as a result of the CHIPS and Science Act so far, which has only passed a few months ago, a number of top semiconductor manufacturers have committed to build major new fabs in the United States. Intel's new $20 billion fab project in Ohio is Ohio's largest ever private sector investment in the history of the state. And Intel could invest up to $100 billion in that same site in years to come. So it's going to have a long-term, very positive impact on the state of Ohio and specifically to the Columbus area. Micron's $100 billion fab project in New York is the largest single private investment in New York State history. It is a massive project. The benefits of these new fabs are many. They also create thousands of high-paying technical jobs that lift the entire economy, both at the fab and at the equipment vendors, as well as in related industries. They will also propel technical education at America's universities. Chip manufacturing will once again become a national expertise in the United States, and the benefits of that will carry forward for decades to come, because we'll have the most educated and talented and skilled workforce in the world. So when future fabs are being built, companies will look for the talented workforce that they need to make that fab successful. They'll look to the United States. This gives the U.S. a technical and intellectual property supremacy over our political adversaries. There are always risks when you make investments of this size. However, it's definitely sure that if we do not invest in our semiconductor manufacturing now, we will continue to fall farther and farther behind the rest of the world in this leading edge high-tech manufacturing that is so critical and so essential to our national security and to our economic freedom. The CHIPS and Science Act of 2022 has definitely spurred massive investments into America's technology manufacturing.